I was just informed that we have certain problems with the team. I hope you are all following us on the live stream, and hopefully we'll be able to soon connect to our event through Teams. My name is Zuzana Pavlickova. I'm Head of Policy and International Relations at the Slovak National Center for Human Rights, and I will be moderating this session on measuring diversity and equality at workplace. Once you will be able to connect to Teams, please make sure that you switch on your cameras, you mute yourself, and also you state your name, your surname, and the organization or institution or subjects that you are representing. Also, if possible, put in the brackets the pronoun that you would like to be referred to, and respect the pronouns that the other participants state when you are referring to them. There will be a room for questions after the presentations, so use the raise your hand button. But if you have any emerging questions during the presentations, you can also write them in the chat box and they will be answered after the presentations. So let's start with the business. This session is organized by the Slovak National Center for Human Rights, which is a national human rights institution and equality body in Slovakia. We were established by law, and we are fulfilling a wide range of tasks in the area of human rights and equality in Slovakia. As equality body, we are well aware of the need of equality data and measuring diversity in order to tackle discrimination at workplace. And why workplace? Mainly because through our casework, we can see that the majority of cases that are reported to us as equality body come from the work environment, and as one of the areas of life where people suffer mostly from discrimination, but not exclusively. And when it comes to Slovak society, we can see that the diversity in our society is increasing, which is, however, not really reflected in the attitudes of the society, and the prejudice and intolerance are still very present. Several studies show that people don't really have experience with diversity at the workplace. For example, Palette Diversity Lab found that 44% of Slovak employees have no experience with diversity at workplace, and those that do have some experience usually connect diversity at workplace with working with older colleagues or parents of young children or with foreigners. But there are other groups that form diversity in our society, such as Roma people, migrants, people with disabilities, or LGBTI people who are overlooked at the workplace. And we can see in surveys and researches that, for example, 66% of LGBTI people in Slovakia are afraid to come out at workplace. And even if they do so, 36% of them then experience negative experiences and problems when it comes to their sexual orientation at workplace. Roma people face very high employment rates that comes from their exclusion from the society, their marginalization. And for example, in 2017, we could see that 29% of all unemployed people in Slovakia were Roma people, which is very unproportional comparing it with the total number of Roma in Slovak society. And employers also lack interest in employing people with disabilities because they see this burden on their budget and something that is very hard and expensive to do. They don't really show any will. There is, in all this background situation, there is a very few will of politicians and to address the situation. There are very few legislative initiatives to work on diversity and equality at workplace. And this is mainly because there are no many experts at the level of public administration on equality and diversity. Public authorities lack capacity to implement equality legislation. Also, and very importantly, Slovakia lacks equality data, and cases of discrimination are being underreported, and there are very few finances and funding available for NGOs that work on equality and diversity issues. And when it comes to companies and businesses, we can see that their practice vary from the sector where they work, or also from the form of business. we can see good practices emerging in transnational companies that are usually following their mother companies and implement diversity and equality policies as part of their CSR, corporate social responsibility. But local and regional employers lack practice, they lack capacity and ability to implement any policies in respect of diversity and equality. And this is what we will talk about in this session. I have two colleagues of mine here with me. Firstly, we will hear from Radka Vicenova, researcher at the Slovak National Center for Human Rights. They will talk about the collection of equality data, why we need equality data, what are equality data, and mainly what are challenges in collecting this data. And then we will hear from Beata Babachova, who is a legal expert for external relations, and she will present you the very new innovative tool for measuring diversity at workplace, the Diversity Index, which has just finished pilot testing in Slovakia. So you are one of the lucky ones to be the first one to be presented this tool. So now I give floor to Radka.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'll try to share the presentation. Hopefully it will work this time as well. So I hope you can all see the presentation and everything is all right. So good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure for me to be here today and to participate in the discussion. I'm sorry we cannot meet in person, but it is what it is, and I hope that we will still have a chance once the technical issues are dealt with to engage in interesting and maybe fruitful discussions about the challenges in collections and interpretation of equality data after our presentation, because that's what I will talk about in the next 15 minutes or so. I will try to share some practices from our work of our research team at Slovak National Center for Human Rights, and I will be also very interested in hearing your feedback and your practice and experiences from your practice as well. So I hope that it could be a really interesting exchange of practice. So my presentation has two points. I will start with defining equality data, which I'm sure it's not that much necessary because I'm sure that everyone who is watching this session do have basic knowledge about what equality data are. But I think it's important to start with the definition, so just to ensure that we are on the same page. So I will just go briefly through some basic information that I think it's important to emphasize before I move to the core part of my presentation, and that's discussing the issues and challenges in measuring diversity and equality at the workplace. And I will just to help as a help to go through these issues systematically, I will present the work of our research team using the methodology of Office of High Commissioner of United Nations for Human Rights, Human Rights Indicators approach, which we consider as very useful, especially in situations where we want to evaluate the diversity, equality at the workplace, but still do not have the sufficient data to do so. So that's what I will try to share the examples when we're trying to monitor and analyze the situation, even though the data that we have are not sufficient or there is lack of data at all. So I will start with this very basic information. I borrowed the definition of equality data from European Commission, from the handbook on equality data. So as equality data, we understand any piece of information useful for the purposes of describing, analyzing, reasoning, and decision making of the state of equality. And that of course means not just data that are collected with the specific purpose of analyzing the state of equality, but also other data that could still provide us with the insight on the state of equality, even though their purpose was different. So we can talk about statistical data like population census, administrative data. We can talk about survey data on public perceptions and attitudes. We can talk about qualitative data. We can talk about data from more like experimental settings such as discrimination testing. We can talk about complaints data, judiciary data. So really any data that could tell us anything about the about how the principles of equality and non-discrimination are applied in the practice. And I'm so sure that I do not need to go into detail why we'll need this equality data. It's not just to detect the discriminatory behavior and to detect the structural discrimination, but also to develop tailor-made policies and also to prevent the situations when some policies have harder impact on certain groups than the others. Now coming more to the context of Slovakia, and I'm sure that that we can also discuss whether this situation is different in other countries. After the presentation, the equality data that are, I'm just simplifying it here, but just to be very brief, the data that are mostly available are data disaggregated based on the age and sex and also disabilities. So these are data that are much easier to track and monitor and analyze than the sensitive data based on like self-identification, also perceptions such as ethnic origin, religion, political beliefs, which also according to the current legislation is difficult to collect as it might be it is considered to be a potential kind of reason for discrimination. So it's much harder to get this data compared to the ones that I mentioned before. And that also I already mentioned a few limitations regarding the equality data collections that we encounter in our work, apart from legal limitations and accessibility of the data or accessibility of the certain data, especially focused on certain target groups. It's also a question of consistency and comparability of data collected by different institutions. And of course, the huge problem are the data on attitudes and perceptions of the public, which is very tricky, not just because of the sensitivity related to the design of this survey, but also regarding the interpretation, which is not always correct and fair. So these are the issues that need to be taken into account. So what I would like to talk about in the next few slides is what exactly can we do if we want to analyze the diversity and equality at the workplace, but we do not really have all the data that we would need to kind of like easily evaluate the situation. And what we use in our work, and that's also how I will structure the next few slides, is the human rights Decatur approach. As I mentioned, it's a framework developed by the Office for High Commissioner for Human Rights of the United Nations to measure progress of human rights implementation, and basically is a framework of a very systematic framework of different kind of qualitative and quantitative indicators that are both objective and subjective, and that kind of allow us to go through all the process of commitment of the human right through the application of this commitment in the practice to what is the impact of these practices on certain, especially the target groups such as minorities, etc. So again, coming specifically to Slovakia and to the situation we have here when it comes to the structural factors, structural indicators, and the state of ratification of international human treaties or domestic anti-discrimination laws. These are usually those indicators that are pretty much dealt with, because we do have ratified the most important treaties, and we do have anti-discrimination legislation in place in Slovakia since 2004. So that's not really an issue. What is our issue is and that's what we are trying to kind of track and monitor and analyze, is how these treaties and how this legislation is actually applied in practice. And I listed few of the process indicators that we are trying to monitor and analyze in this regard, mostly related to either proportion of received complaints of cases of direct indirect discrimination, how these complaints are handled, what are the statistics regarding the reporting of discrimination in the workplace to different institutions and initiating legal action in this regard. Then, of course, what is the state of some educational and awareness raising campaigns and programs targeted on either law enforcement officials or employers or employees regarding the anti-discrimination practices at the workplace. And of course, also the the question on whether there is a system or certified discrimination-free business in place, which is something that my colleague will talk about in just a few minutes, so I won't go into detail here. But what I would like to share a bit more insight is an example on two very specific indicators that show in practice what it means if you do not have the data that you would need, but you want to kind of analyze in detail what's the situation with the applicability of equality and non-discrimination principles at the workplace, and how to interpret those data and those results. And so these two indicators that I pointed out in this presentation, one indicator focused on the job vacancy announcement, violating the principle of non-discrimination, and the second one is data on anti-discrimination lawsuits. Just to I'm coming to the first one, how it looks like in the field of non-discrimination principles and the job vacancy announcement, background from Slovakia, based on the existing anti-discrimination legislation in the Slovak Republic. The employer is not allowed to ask or collect the data, sensitive information, which means that these data are not or cannot be the kind of like included in any database or any data that we could ask for in terms of like the statistics of job vacancy announcement. And then there is also an issue of public and private provider of job advertising, which in very simplified way means that there is public job advertising provider where public institutions are obliged to publish their job vacancy announcement, but it's not that much popular compared to private provider, which is much more popular, but there is no such obligation in place. So that raises a question of accessibility of data, because of course private job provider doesn't need or is not obliged to share the data or database with us if we want to analyze this data. So we have to access this data differently and usually in much more difficult way. And there is also a question of usefulness and information value of the publicly available database, because there are information that have to be there based on the law, but not all of them. So of course it means that we can be missing some information. So what we did in this regard, because when looking at the existing or looking at the database that we can get from the state authorities, of course there are no discriminatory practices visible from the hard data, but when we looked at the qualitative content analysis of the job vacancy announcement in greater detail, we were able to identify the contextual indication of discriminatory practices. So let's call it like unofficial way how to detect the ethnicity of job applicants even without stating it openly, or how to kind of include very like less pronounced examples of discriminatory practices, more difficult to identify. For instance, in Slovak language, you have different variations of the word when it comes to men and women. So you can use the women variation when you are looking for assistant, but you can use the men variation if you are looking for a lawyer, which is very common case. So here I just wanted to illustrate like even without the kind of sufficient hard data that we could rely on, we were able to analyze and detect the potentially discriminatory practices even with limited data and very and kind of like with more effort, but still interesting results. And very briefly on the second example that I wanted to provide, again, the anti-discrimination legislation that I already mentioned, 2004, means that structural indicators were basically fulfilled, but there are questions how this legislation is actually effective in practice, and we wanted to evaluate that based on the anti-discrimination lawsuits and also anti-discrimination or judicial decisions in the field of anti-discrimination. So the first challenge that we had to encounter is the accessibility of data, because we were able to get the data on judicial decisions, but we have no idea about how many lawsuits were filed in this regard, and also we have not enough information on like complaint on discriminatory practices received by different institutions. We are one of the institutions, so we have, of course, our database, but we do not have always access to the database of other institutions, and these data are not always comparable. So that creates a lot of problems in terms of like evaluating the issue. And then there is also a question of what is actually the informative value of this data if they're inconsistent or incomparable. So again, based on qualitative content analysis of the available judicial decisions and like which points to different interesting results, including like we were able to point to very lengthy court proceedings and also to very kind of like weak points on the judicial statistics and database contents. We were able to build like evidence-based arguments and enter discussion about or push for changes when it comes to how the data are collected and how data are or how the databases on these issues are built. And we hope that we will be able to kind of point based on this structure, we will be able to point to how, like, why exactly this is important and why we need to change this. And very briefly, just so I conclude the trilogy of the indicators, there is also of course, the issue of how certain policies impact different groups. And again, we can, when it comes to diversity and equality in the workplace, we can look at the unemployment rate, average earnings, and also target population below the poverty line before and after social transfers. And in line with what I said at the beginning, we do have access to data on these issues for certain groups, based on usually age, sex, or disabilities, but we have no idea like how these indicators would look like for some other minorities, such as LGBTI community or ethnic national community, etc., etc. So these are the limitations that also need to be like constantly highlighted and pushed forward. So I think I've been talking quite a lot. So just to conclude, what I wanted to do with this presentation is not only to share the work of our research team and to show how we are trying to cope with the fact of that we do not always have all the equality data that we would need in order to evaluate the application of principles of non-discrimination equality at the workplace, but I also wanted to emphasize how such a systematic approach as human rights indicators approach helped us not only to systematically identify the problems with the implementation of these principles, but also to identify the contextual indications, which might not be always visible on the first sight, and also to build the argument in order to kind of push for changes regarding how the data are collected and how they are shared and included in the public databases, so we can do our work more effectively in the future. Thank you very much. Of course, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer and discuss afterwards. And now I would like to pass the floor to my colleague. Thank you very much.
So now it's my turn to continue with the presentation. I'm not sure whether you see already my presentation. Hope it's working. I will talk about how to measure diversity at workplace, and I would like to introduce our completely new innovative measuring tool we created together with our partner Tontis Foundation as a part of the project which was funded by the European Commission. So I would like to start my presentation why it's actually important to measure diversity at workplace. First of all, of course, it's good reputation. It always comes with profit, and it gives you access to your employees, to your suppliers, and to customers. As more diverse collective of people who is working for your company, it brings new ideas, and those brings you closer to more customers and more suppliers you are able to attract. Obviously, it's connected to motivation and productivity of employees, to those who feel safe and welcomed at workplace, have better work ethics, they work more, and they have better results. And obviously, as usually taught by companies, it is very important for talent management, so you are able to retain talent and attract new talent who will work for you, especially younger generations. And I will leave it to you who younger generations are, care who they work for. And last but not least, these times we are always talking about innovations, especially social innovations. Diversity at workplace supports innovations because diversity is connected with the flexible, creative and innovative thinking and the way we are thinking. So more people and more diverse people, the various ways of thinking can bring us better results. So what is our starting point? I would like to mention two sides of the coin. First, there are employers. As we can see by the PwC Diversity and Inclusion Benchmarking Study, 76% of European employers believe diversity is a stated value or priority area for the organization. But only 33% of European employers agree that diversity is a barrier to progression at the organization. Majority of the European employers, 46%, that's the highest number, leverage the diversity and inclusion program to attract and retain talent, as I already mentioned. And 20% of European employers do not gather and analyze data to evaluate whether their diversity and inclusion program is actually good. And there is, on the other hand, there are employees. So, as my colleague already mentioned, PayLab diversity study. This study was not only conducted in Slovakia, but also in Poland, Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Finland, and Sweden. And the overall results are that 4 in 10 employees have not experienced diversity at workplace, especially concerning various vulnerable groups, such as ethnic, national minorities, persons with physical disabilities, or sexual orientation or identity. And only 20% of European employees have actual experience of working with coworkers belonging to ethnic minority. 13% have experience of working with coworkers having disability, and only 12% of European employees have experience of working with coworkers belonging to the LGBTQI+ communities. So how do we measure diversity at workplace? This varies, but usually there are 3 types of way how we do it. First of all, we are conducting audits based on legal requirements. In many countries, there are already laws which are setting up requirements for companies of certain size, turnout, or companies who already employ a certain number of employees to conduct audits. Usually these are thematic audits and mostly focused on gender pay gap, or they are already highly connected with business and human rights topics. So they are usually turning corporate social responsibility to actually respecting human rights and preparing vigilance plans. As example, may serve gender pay gap audit in Sweden or vigilance plan requirements in France. Next, many companies or employers, because these can be also state authorities, are hiring external subjects to conduct various thematic partial audits. These are well known, especially in terms of hiring, for instance, patient organization that is actually assessing your workplace, whether it's accessible to certain group of persons with certain disability, either it's, for instance, visual impairment, or persons with certain types of physical disability, for instance, people using wheelchair as a compensation aid. And then there is a huge boom in using self-evaluation tools developed by various stakeholders. These may be equality bodies, diversity charters, or other non-governmental organizations, and these might be either indices or various checklists. Just to give you a simple list of self-evaluation tools, there is implementation checklist for diversity management developed by European Commission, very popular global diversity and inclusion benchmarks developed by the Center for Global Inclusion, and then there is also InnoDiversity Index by Fundación Diversidad. I really recommend to check this one, and quite a new tool developed by Finnish administrator of a diversity charter, diversity and inclusion self-assessment tool. If you are interested in having links, don't hesitate to contact us and we will provide you more information how you can access these self-evaluation tools. They are quite great. They are basically set on the set of questions and terms where you are saying whether you meet the requirements or not, and then it gives you a certain result, but it's always self-evaluation, so you are working with your data you have from your own workplace, and it's not evaluated whether you are providing actual objective data. So I would like to introduce our diversity index. It was actually made by the Slovak National Center for Human Rights in partnership with the Pontis Foundation. We developed it, as I said, it was developed under auspices of Equality Body and Diversity Charter Administrator. So we really think that this partnership was quite a great choice. And it was developed by experts and as a part of participatory process. We included representative of states, academia, non-governmental organizations and businesses. We started with a preliminary study that mapped the approaches to measuring diversity in Europe as well in Slovakia. And then based on this study and its findings, we actually developed the tool, which was consulted within the working group that had free meetings and discussed individual parts of the index, especially whether the parts and the parts of the index are interconnected, whether the methodology is great, and whether it's including everything what it has to, as well as whether it's easy to use and understand by companies, whether it's not burden, and whether these companies actually or employers have data which are needed to actually use this tool. So it's a self-evaluation tool for any employer, regardless of the size, turnout, ownership structure, or legal form. And we hope that it will be used not only by private companies and large companies, but also by small employers and especially a state as an employer. It takes approximately 30 minutes to complete. I must say 30 minutes is for a person who is already well established in the topic of diversity and non-discrimination. So it might be some diversity and inclusion lead, but if a company is not having such a function or an employee working for them, it might take quite a time, I would say, but up to 1 hour, because you need to get yourself prepared before you actually start to fill up the questionnaire, which is actually the backbone of the index. You will need all the strategies and policies and materials of your company that is actually regulating diversity and non-discrimination, including partial topics such as sexual harassment at your workplace. And you will need the data, especially those who are connected with the number of employees working for your company, number of women, number of elderly employees, persons with disabilities, and the average and their average salary by hourly rate and so forth. So you will need actually to get yourself prepared before you will use the tool. It includes 34 questions. You can get yourself 100 points. That's the highest number, and it's divided in several sections. So the first section is diversity in general. Then it's followed by the gender diversity section on disability, age diversity, and it also touches upon LGBTQI+ and ethnic and cultural diversity. Obviously, these 34 questions are not divided equally between these sections, as there is less data you can collect as an employer in the field of LGBTQI+ communities and their support at workplace, as well as in terms of collecting data on ethnic and cultural background of your employees. That's strictly prohibited in Slovakia. So there are a few questions that might give you a hint how diverse your workplace is in this term, but we can actually measure no pay gaps or their representation in decision-making and other participatory processes. And obviously, as I already mentioned, if you have a diversity and inclusion lead, it's very easy for you to fill it up, but it's not the case for every single employer, whether private or public. Therefore, we develop also a set of tooltips that explain some more difficult terms or calculations. We don't expect all employers to be able to define what discrimination is, or what's the sexual harassment, or what actually do we mean by having set up mechanisms or complete procedure on discrimination or sexual harassment, as well as some other terms, what does it mean, reasonable accommodation or accessibility. So we are trying to explain in the questionnaire individual terms how we see. Usually we use obviously well-established and legal definitions, but those terms which are not defined, we're trying to take the midstream, so it's a very common definition usually used that was chosen. The index uses 3R methodology, so it's based on representation, reality, and resources. So it reflects on the representation of members of vulnerable groups in top and middle management. We focused especially on women and persons with disabilities. We also evaluate various policies, and there is a huge variety of those we ask for. So this can be policy on diversity, non-discrimination, sexual harassment, supporting employment of graduates, supporting employment of elderly, supporting employment of persons with disabilities, accessibility of your workplace, supporting LGBTQI+ employees, family benefits, observing cultural and religious events and specifics, and so on. We of course look into resources, so we compare various pay gaps, especially age pay gap and disability pay gap and gender pay gaps. And I would like to share some examples of questions with you. From the general part, there is, for instance, questions: does your company or organization have a strategy or other policy on diversity management? And you can choose from 4 of these options. Either you have a very refined strategy, or you have strategy in respect certain vulnerable groups. Many companies are focusing especially on women. Or you have diversity management included in other documents of the company or organization, or you don't deal with diversity at all. For each of these answers, you will get certain number of points. So for the answer A, you will get 3 points. For B, you get 2 points. For C, 1, and obviously for D, you won't get any point. Another example, for instance, was the representation of women in top management of the company or organization. And here we play with the share of women in top management in comparison with the total share of women in the company or organization, or either it's higher, equal, lower, or lower by more than 10%. And then, for instance, we have questioned: did your company adopt reasonable accommodation to ensure the accessibility of workplace, including physical surroundings, IT infrastructure, and other services? Obviously, this is quite a tricky question. Majority people or majority companies and organizations would, yeah, of course, yes, we have removed 100% of barriers and ensure the accessibility to all persons with disabilities because we installed 1 ramp or we have elevator. But this is not the case. This is the great question where I can show you why those 2 tips are very important, because not only that we need to explain what reasonable accommodation is, but also to name and define all the little points of what accessibility means. So it's not only physical accessibility of the surroundings, but it's also accessibility of persons with visual impairments or hear impairments or with mental illnesses and so forth. So we made sure that no company who's actually having a fully accessible workplace will check A. Obviously, it's not possible for everyone to have accessible workplace, so there are even more options for them. B, the company or organization has ensured the accessibility of the workplace only in respect to persons with disabilities it employs. There are many employers who actually decide to launch a program which is focused on certain type of persons with disabilities. For instance, a company is employing persons with autism at some department where there is possible for them to work for, or they are focusing on employing persons with a visual impairment. Therefore, they actually make their workplace accessible to these people with disabilities, but then others are excluded. Obviously, the company or organization has partly removed the barriers, and the workplace or the company has not removed any barriers. Yes, there are still such companies or institutions. Two more examples. For instance, does your company or organization provide family benefits to same-sex couples? Maybe you don't know, but in Slovakia, we don't have any laws that would set up registered partnership or any other civil unions for same-sex couples. Therefore, employers are not obliged to actually provide them with the family benefits, just like to homosexual couples. And therefore, we are asking also this question, whether these family benefits are available to the same-sex couples. If not, whether there is at least partially available, or whether the company or organization is not providing any benefits, any family benefits to such couples. And last example, does your company or organization take into the consideration cultural and religious specifics of all the groups and majority population by implementing soft measures? This is actually targeting ethnic minorities and religious minorities at workplace. So the company can not only takes into consideration such specific, but also respect the specific. There can be a scenario where company actually fully respects such specific, but it doesn't take any active steps or doesn't provide, for instance, these employees with any measures that would help them to feel better at workplace. So we also divided it into four possible answers, and one of those are these, like the company is taking into consideration such specific but doesn't take any measures or only upon request. So how we evaluate this index? Obviously, it's point-based. We divided all companies who are taking this index into four categories. Either you are diversity beginner, explorer, pioneer, or champion. Obviously, after you are filling up the questionnaire, because it's a web-based application, once you will fill up the questionnaire and you will enter your basic data, your name, surname, email, and the company you are representing, you will be sent out a certificate of it. It is a certificate which serves you as some basis for your further development in this topic. It's not an official confirmation or results confirming whether there is or there is not diversity at your workplace, as the Slovak National Center for Human Rights nor our partner Pontis Foundation is able to verify whether those data entered into the questionnaire are objective and they are true. But we thought that this certificate could be used for this company to actually improve in this term, and not only it includes what category of diversity in what category of diversity management you are, but and gives you a short description. For instance, diversity beginner is a company that has minimum experience of promoting diversity and inclusion. As you can see, it doesn't have any experience if managing the diversity and then explorer has a partial experience and makes effort and has limited diversity management experience. And then Pioneer and Champion. So Pioneer is a company that has a relevant experience in promoting and managing diversity. It can implement even complex and innovative measure. And obviously, Diversity Champion is a company which can serve as a great good practice example and can implement very complex, innovative measures. And each certificate comes also with tailor-made recommendations, because we got certified and what's next. So these recommendations are different from depending on your level. So for instance, to give you a few examples, if you are a diversity beginner, we would recommend you to define your corporate organizational values in the context of diversity and non-discrimination, organize a workshop on promoting non-discrimination, diversity and inclusion at your workplace, and prepare a simple plan of measures and activities to introduce at your workplace and develop this topic more. And if you're a champion, we recommend you to regularly evaluate the efficiency of measures adopted to promote the diversity and inclusion at your workplace and publish these findings in your annual report. Communicate the topic of non-discrimination, diversity and inclusion at your workplace externally, and obviously be a leader in promotion of diversity and inclusion at workplace, connect with other stakeholders and improve the situation in this field on national level. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you have more questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for presenting. I think this was both of your presentations gave us so many information, so it's kind of complex now to connect it all. But if there are so far no questions from the audience, if you have any questions, please raise your hand, or as we also do not have that many participants, you can directly switch off your mic and ask, or write them in the chat box. If there are yet no questions, I would like to firstly ask Bea. As I mentioned, this tool, the Diversity Index, it has just been tested by the pilot companies. We are not going to name the companies, but the companies that tested it were either involved even in the working group preparing the tool, or there are signatories of the Diversity Charter in Slovakia. So we would assume that they have some background on diversity and they are invested in the topic. So I would like to ask you if you could share. I know we cannot name, we cannot shame, we cannot showcase, but did we get some diversity pioneers or even champions, or the results from the pilots? We can see that even though these are the companies that should know better and do better, are still diversity beginners. Which were the results of the pilot testing?
The majority of companies who tried the pilot version of the index actually fell into the category either of explorer or pioneer, so they have still work to do. It's very interesting that many of these companies actually consider themselves to be leaders in the topic. They're very active in the Diversity Charter, and they also publish their inclusion and diversity reports, but usually it fails on the fact that they are solely focusing on one aspect of diversity, for instance, employing persons with disabilities and making the workplace accessible, or focusing on gender equality at workplace and promoting the representation of women in participation, and then they forgot on other groups. Or there were company fully focusing on supporting and promoting the rights of LGBTQI+ employees, and they also support their activities at workplace. But then, of course, they forget all the aspects of diversity, and of course some of these companies, they don't have a chance to develop more their diversity program, for instance in respect to ethnic minorities such as Roma, because majority of Roma population is not living in the part of the Slovakia where they are doing business, or these usually these marginalized communities don't have the skills necessary to get employed by the companies. So there is a huge gap, and I think it will be great to see how we can actually close this gap, so even those companies who consider themselves a leader can advance their diversity and inclusion programs.
Thank you, Bea. We also have a question and a comment in the chat box from Irene Amoroso from organization Intersex International Europe, asking how we can improve measurement of equality and diversity in regards to intersex employee. And one thing that is suggested by organization is that we can ask questions about sex characteristics on a complete voluntary and anonymous basis. And also it is suggested to a research that is shared in the chat box. So those of you that are interested, there is also a link to a research. If Radka could try to answer the question, or what is your view, Radka, colleague, and also Beata, if you have any comment on this, how we can improve measuring equality and diversity in regards to quite a sensitive topic on measuring it with regards to intersex employees.
I'm not sure. I would say that Bea would be more qualified to answer this one. What I would say, I mean, I wouldn't say that I have any specific suggestions or solution to this one. I can just say that one of the issue that might be very complicated, especially in such a context in Slovakia, is just very simple thing that whether it would be even possible to expect from employees to share this kind of information, as it would be potentially very kind of harmful or dangerous in terms of kind of like issues about the anonymity or data protection when it comes to the approach of the Slovak employees. So I mean, in Slovakia, I would say that this would be the issue that would have to be answered first, whether there is actually an environment that would be safe and trustful enough to even ask these questions. That's what I would say from the point of like what I would expect from the available data. When it comes to measurement, I would leave this question to Bea. I'm not sure if I'm sure that it was also the part of the diversity measurement issue.
Yes, as you are saying, Radka, we had a huge issue how to incorporate LGBTQI+ people in this questionnaire, and many LGBTQI+ organizations were asking like, okay, how you will make sure that these communities are represented in the diversity index. And we are actually we were able to come up with questions that are targeting transgender employees, at least something. But if it comes to intersex people, we don't have even medical standards for these communities here in Slovakia. It's absenting, and I think, as you said, we need to start with education, because people are scared. They are very scared of negative reactions. Even those employers who are champions in supporting LGBTQI+ communities were complained about. We got complaint to our organization as equality body, which was claiming that the company who is actually praising itself for being LGBTQI+ friendly was discriminating such an employee. So I think we need to go beyond just promoting some events or and truly trying to establish the equality at workplace and remove the prejudice we have, and that can be done only through education, training, and I'm not saying only at workplace. I think we should start in schools, and plus it should be normal to have more options, just two sexes. That's the problem. Majority in Slovakia, you can opt only to choose one of two sexes, and you can use only two pronouns here in Slovakia. So it's very difficult, and it will come, I hope, with changes in society that is more tolerant and I hope it will be more tolerant. But so far, the answer is we don't know how to measure, because we don't have access to data, and it's, even though we would establish some pattern or some way how to collect this data, we are not sure whether these people would be willing to provide this data, as it is very, very dangerous. I know that it seems like I would be in some third world country, but no, it's very dangerous, even in Slovakia, to identify self differently from being a cis male or cis woman.
Okay, thank you, girls. Irene also shared her contact, and we'll make sure to get in touch, because she says she can be of help. So it will be very useful to debate this more into details. Also in Slovakia, we do have NGOs working a lot on LGBT issues, but I must say that the rights of, and in general, the situation of intersex people is not that visible and is not very represented. So it will be very useful for us to hear from you and learn from you. And we have one more question in the chat box asking about practical challenges when implementing the diversity index as an instrument. Were there any pushbacks from companies on any specific areas, or did we have to convince the companies on the efficiency of the instrument? And this is a question for Beata. You can also tell more what is going to happen now with the index. It has just passed the pilot testing, so what are we going to do more with it? Thank you.
Obviously, majority of the companies who were involved in creating the diversity index wanted to got the biggest share related to the diversity they already promote or protect. So there were companies fighting for gender diversity to be included in more questions. Then there were companies, yes, let's push for diversity in terms of disability at workplace, because that's what we do. We are good at it, and then we would get great results in the end. One of the concerns were, how much time will I need to fill up the questionnaire? Because companies are very busy and time is very precious. who should do it, because as I said, not everybody has fancy diversity and inclusion lead. These people can be found in very large companies, but in small employers or even in public sector, you won't find these people. So usually you will have to find a person who not only has time but has access to this very sensitive data, because even knowing the average pay of women in your company is not an information that can be disclosed to any employee working for your company. So these were the questions that were considered more like challenges. And last but not least, I would say many of these companies were afraid how to calculate these pay gaps, and it's very time consuming, and do I really need a calculator while filling up online questionnaire? So we are working on that. So we are trying to make everything so easy for them, so just to motivate them to actually try the diversity index. And I know that our partner Pontis Foundation, they already set up a while ago an event. It's called Via Bonus. So they are actually rewarding companies that are active in social responsibility, diversity, inclusion, and non-discrimination, and they are giving various awards to these people or to these companies who are actually nominated or they applied to be in the competition, and they would like to base some of the awards on the results of the diversity index. So the company who will actually, for instance, would like to apply for the award of best employer will need to submit the results of the diversity index. What we see as a huge issue is whether these data entered by these companies are valid, whether they are true, whether they are not gonna answer quickly, so they will skip on reading the full question, reading the tooltips, so they fully understand, and so on. So there can be even some results which are not really truly reflecting what's going on at the workplace. But that's the issue, I think, of all these diversity measurement tools, whether these are checklists or indices.
Okay, thank you. I hope this answers the questions. And in case there are no other questions or comments from the audience, or if Beata or Radka would like to share some final thoughts, I think we can. Do you have anything to add with this respect?
I would like to mostly thank you all for coming and listening to us, and I hope we can work together to improve the data collection in the field of equality and non-discrimination. It would help many of us in our daily work, and to improve the society and how it's function. And I hope that more diversity indices will come up. I already have to not only promote the Slovak one, but I would like to shout out Czech diversity charter, Finnish diversity charter, Spanish diversity charter, and Polish diversity charter. So no matter from what country you're coming, I'm sure you will find something what is very close to you or your region. So go and check it out and try it, because all of us here, if you are not self-employed, you are employees. So try it out for yourself and motivate your colleagues to try it out at your workplace and implement some measures to improve the situation, because everyone, even us as the center, can improve in this field. Thank you.
Well, there is really nothing to add after what Bea said. She said it all. So I agree, and I would also like to thank to all of you who were listening to us. And yeah, we have a lot of work to do, but yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so I would like to say again and repeat to my colleagues, thanks everybody that was listening to these presentations. I hope it was useful for you. I think no matter where we come from, which country, we all face the same problems with collecting equality data. Either we are being said that it is very sensitive, or it's protected by personal data, or why even people don't understand why will we need this data. So I think this presentation made it a bit clearer, and then we will all together work on addressing the issue and gathering the data so that we can tackle discrimination, and not only tackle it but prevent it from happening in the future. So thank you very much. And in case you have any questions, you can come to us either to our emails that you can find in the FRF forum registrations, or you can also write to our general email info@snslp.sk, and we'll be very happy to answer your questions. Goodbye.